Well, are you a thermostat or a thermometer? What, you might be saying? What on earth would we be a thermostat or a thermometer for? Well, it's quite interesting, isn't it? What does a thermostat do? A thermostat limits the temperature, doesn't it? It lets it rise up, and once it gets to a certain point, that's where it stops. It doesn't get hotter and it doesn't get colder. It just maintains that. And a thermometer just registers, just shows where you are at, this level, or this level. And believe it or not, we actually have within us this thermostat, a ceiling that cuts us off, whether it's ambition, whether it's a money level. Have you ever noticed you're striving hard to get, that next level of income or money coming in? And once you're nearly there, all of these bills, the car breaks down, this happens, and the money just goes out quicker than what it was coming in. That's the subconscious thermostat kicking in. It's our internal belief system. Now, I have a couple of stories to share with you. One is with Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. They were recording Miss You in Paris. Anyway, they'd finished the recording, listening to it, and felt something just wasn't quite right, so they took a break. Mick Jagger apparently was walking down the subway of Paris and came across a harmonica player. And he thought, wow, this guy is really brilliant. So I opened up a discussion and invited him back to the studio, and they did another jam session, and apparently the song was clinched. Anyway, so this young fellow was invited to perform on the stage that night with the Rolling Stones. Well, you could imagine his excitement. But subconsciously, guess what kicked in? You've got it, his thermostat. So around to the stage, the backstage door he goes that night, and the security guards were there, and of course they frisked him, and what they found. And in those days there was no telecommunication through, but anyway, he just simply wasn't allowed in to perform on stage. And it was his thermostat kicking in, his ceiling of belief that he could be no better, that he could rise to no greater height than performing in the busking in the railway stations there. Interesting, very interesting scenario. Then I have another situation where, a young lass I knew many years ago had a domineering mother, and she could bet your bottom dollar, she'd be running late. There was always something wrong for the mother to complain about. And so this particular time she had to go take a mother to the airport, send a mother off on a trip, and look after the mother's place. So she was in and out with the keys, and she said, I always put the keys in the centre console. They were there and I knew exactly where they were. And she said, and the last time I went to the house before I picked my mum up from the airport was I went to put them in the little pit of the armrest. And as I put them down, I said to myself, no, you know what will happen. You will forget where you've put them. You'll lose them. So she's picked them up, and she thought she put them in the centre console. But that thermostat, that ceiling of belief kicked in. And as she's picked them up, she's dropped them, and she must have had something else in her hands, because she was saying, I can clearly see picking them up, transferring them in my hand and putting them in the console and putting my drink bottle on top. Didn't happen, did it? Because she dropped the keys. Anyway, unbeknownst to her, the keys are dropped. The next day, off she goes to the airport to pick up her mum and take her home. They get home. She goes to pick the keys up from the centre console, and they're not there. She said, I nearly died because I had worked so hard to make sure that those blessed keys were there, and now how did this happen? They weren't there. And as she was telling me, we both laughed, because she realised, and because she'd shared so many stories with me over the years, I realised exactly what had happened. Her subconscious ceiling of belief had kicked in. As hard as she had tried, and as conscious as she was of that, after all of these years, it was still there. So what's your thermostat? Is it with money? Or is it with somebody? Is it with a situation? Take time to think about it and just be aware of it, because once you become aware of it, that's when change can take place.